Right, hi there. My name's Ed. I am currently a teacher, but I used to be a TA and done work in several secondary schools. I've just been asked to answer a few questions for you and help you out with your training in sort of roles, responsibilities of TA and co-teaching in different lessons. So, typical day for me when I was a TA was, it's a range of lessons throughout the day. 1 minute you're taking part in a full English lesson, then you're going to maths, maybe you're doing PE. It depends on what timetable you're doing, but you know the general outcomes are you're teaching across a range of subjects, across a range of ages. Sometimes you'll know the children and you'll have a really good idea of what you might need to do with them. Also, you're covering other TAs that might not be there, and you're working in their classrooms, and you might not really know the children or the class or the teacher that you're going to be working with. So, it can be quite interesting on some days, and other days it's quite settled, and you know exactly what you're doing. Right, the skills needed. Right, main skills for me is patience. I think so many children that I work with, and you kind of need to know how to interact with them, and how to help them. It's not always easy because not all the kids are happy to see you when you walk into a lesson. You don't always strike up really great relationships with the kids that you really want to help the most. And also, you know, the teachers that you work with are so varied in their style of what they do and how they want you to be in the lesson. It's patience is a key skill. Being adaptable, like I said, many teachers that you work with across a day. You know, you could be working with 4 different teachers in a day, or you could actually be working with a cover teacher or a supply teacher that also doesn't really know what they're doing. So being adaptable is really a really key skill. Many teachers, like I said, many different styles of teaching, and there's the amount of different children. You know, so many strengths, so many weaknesses. I'm okay with maths. I'm okay to a point with English, but I mean, there's so many things in those areas that you need to know or have some kind of knowledge of. It's really quite tricky to just sort of go from one lesson to another lesson to another lesson, because the content can be quite overwhelming sometimes, and you're not always going to have a really great subject knowledge of all the lessons that you are in. So being adaptable and kind of, I guess, bluffing it in some lessons is a really good skill to have. Right, what's the next one? Role of the teacher. Again, I suppose I can be a little bit biased now because I am a teacher now, but I remember it is very varied. Planning wise, some teachers will write a full script for themselves, for the TA, and you go in there and you've got like reams of paper, which is great, but also you just don't have time to read it, and you having time to read it once is rare, and if it's a big load of planning that you've been given, you're going to need to read it a couple of times. You're just not going to have the time. So in that situation, you just kind of feel your way through the lesson. But it's really good to have more, because then you at least can refer to it if you're struggling to know what exactly it is that needs to be done in that lesson. Obviously, on the other side of the scale, probably more like me as a teacher, you don't get any planning at all. You kind of just walk into the room, teacher sort of starts a lesson, and you kind of think, okay, this is one I'm going to have to really listen really carefully to what the teacher's doing. I'm going to have to listen carefully to what group, child, where I'm expected to be, what the outcomes are. So, you do what you can, and you sort of just try and go with it. And hopefully, if you've got no planning, the teacher will sometimes sort of come over to you after a task has been set and give you direction then. Other teachers kind of don't really interact with you at all. You're there, they know you're there, but they just kind of teach their lesson, set the work, expect you to just crack on with whatever you're doing, and it's kind of up to you to make what you need to do in that lesson up, really. And you kind of if you know the class, you can go to the children that you think need help, as long as the teacher's not helping them. But other times you kind of just sort of try and do what you can do to support the lesson. But like having some kind of interaction with the teacher, having some kind of written plan, even if it's just, you know, a few lines, TA to do this, work with these children, outcomes, you know, because I guess it's the most important thing is the outcome of a lesson. If you don't really know what it is, then it's really difficult to help the children that are trying to succeed in that lesson. So the teacher, I think, would be super important, because they can make you feel part of the lesson, so that you know exactly how to help the children, or they can make you feel like a real inconvenience, and you kind of just sort of do your thing and then leave. Okay, behaviour management. Obviously you've got to be up to date as a TA with the school policy, and follow that policy, you know, to the letter, and support the teacher who should be following that policy as well. I guess the teacher's role in helping you with behaviour management, as in the TA, is, again, mixed bag. Some teachers will put it clearly into their planning, teaching assistant to look after these children, make sure they're not doing this, you know, and they'll have a clear plan for those children that are problem children, in how to deal with them and how to support them best in their lesson. It's probably, in some respects, and with some children you work with, it's probably more important to have some kind of behaviour plan from a teacher rather than planning. An experienced TA can kind of just manage in the lesson without too much planning. But when you've got difficult children, it's really important to have some kind of behaviour plan, especially if your TA has come in and they're covering somebody else and they don't really know the class that well, and you say, right, actually in your plan, this child here sits in this seat, you've got to watch out for them, or can you sit next to them and explain it to them and basically keep them out of trouble, or give them extra support in that lesson. So it's really important that gets put in a plan to a teaching assistant. Training wise, there's not a great deal of training that the TAs get. Sometimes they'll join in with staff meetings if it's like a whole school change and it's something to do with English or maths, especially, you know, those core subjects. But in general, there's not much training. We have a couple of meetings with SLT, not weekly, maybe once a month, where they sort of fill you in on mainly news, what's going on in the school, how we think we're doing, things that TAs need to do, things that you need to ask from the teacher. So there is meetings to let you kind of get a clearer picture of what you need to be doing. But pay-wise, TAs they're not paid well. They're not paid well at all. I was on about £13,000 a year full time, and within that pay bracket, there's no progression at all. If you want to remain a TA, that's it. That's your money. There's no, oh, I've been doing it for 10 years and I'm now up to 14. No, it's the set pay. There's no going up a pay scale. Obviously, there's an HLTA role which is available, but not to everybody. You've got to be recommended by the school to do an HLTA course. So you have to obviously be very competent TA to be able to do that. And then if you're an HLTA, you can lead classes if teachers are away. You can be like a cover supervisor and make sure people are in the right place at the right time, covering lessons that haven't got teachers to them. So that's more pay, you know, another couple of £1,000 a year for that. But yeah, some schools will only pay an HLTA for the time they're covering lessons. So you can be an HLTA, but if you're not actually covering a lesson, you're not being paid as an HLTA, you're still getting a TA wage. So it's a slightly blurred lines. Also, you're only paid from, you know, sort of 9 till 3, really. Or depending on your school day, you know, some TAs are paid from 8:30 till 3, or maybe 10 to 9 till 3, but generally 3 o'clock is the cut-off. And many schools go beyond that, so they'll be working till 3:15. You know, so TAs shouldn't really be there, and you can't really ask them to do much more because they are doing a lot already. Problems. Problems for TAs, probably changes in timetables, the biggest one. Always you go in, right, you're not in that class today, they're this class, you here, there and everywhere. So it's, you've got to sort of run with that. Communication between TAs and teachers is really tricky. As you'll be finding out, as I know now, teaching is an incredibly busy job, lots of work to do, constantly. Their time is so precious, and the last thing they really want to be doing, well, actually, the thing they really need to be doing and want to be doing is talking to their TAs about their lessons, but also they just don't have time. You only see them when you're in their lesson. If they're not in their lesson, they're in their classroom marking and you're doing something else. So time is precious. Communication is really difficult between the teacher and the TA. Like I said, planning, it's always inconsistent. Some teachers brilliant, some teachers give you too much, some teachers don't give you anything. So that's a really inconsistent way. So you just know the teachers that won't give you any planning, and maybe if you get a good relationship with them, you can talk to them in a lesson and they'll explain it to you. Another problem is support. There's not that much support for a TA. If they've got problems with a teacher, if they're having problems with a class, there's not, they can't just go up to SLT and be like, hey, SLT, I've got problems with this. They can't really do it. They can speak to the class teacher and say, this is what happened in this lesson, hopefully it gets passed up, or they say, oh, this happened to me, and you've got to rely on other people to kind of shift your problems up the chain of command, unless you're like super pushy, which you should be really as a TA. So in general, the role of the TA has changed a lot. It's not as much doing the odd jobs, classroom management, displays, laminating, gluing. That's an archaic view now of the teaching assistant. It's every lesson is me teaching small groups, teaching one-to-ones, leading any interventions, doing specific behaviour management tasks. Your involvement in a lesson now is, obviously you don't give the input like the teacher, but when the input's over and the work is started, you're essentially doing what a teacher does. You're working with children, trying to move them on. So you have to take the full part of the lesson. You can't just sort of say, oh, I don't fancy it, so I'm just going to go to the back and do a bit of, cutting out and display work. You can't do that. You have to be fully involved 100% in that lesson. So, I guess nowadays the teaching assistant is really used as a secondary teacher, the co-teacher of the classroom, apart from any of the input into the lesson, plenaries, etc., etc. They don't have to do any of that, but as soon as that work has started and the children are going for it, that is when you become the co-teacher and you are working with those children every day to move them on. I think that's, well, looking at the time, it's about 13 minutes, probably enough. So good luck to you all. I hope this has been helpful to you, and good luck becoming teachers. Bye bye.